hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now. I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now. I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now.
All right, everybody. Thanks for stopping in. We've got a couple of hundred people that are already hopping onto the chat, and we've got Marty Belanger and Eva Chipiuk, and we're going to be going over the what's going on with the class action lawsuits against the province of Alberta. But I am going to take and kind of hoard the conversation for a couple of quick seconds. I am running for city councillor in Ward 4 for the city of Calgary. Thanks, Marty. And I am going to be having a launch party, an official launch party, which I'm pretty excited about. And I've upped the budget, so I'm not just going to be serving carrots and cold cuts. We're going to have some things on the menu. If you'd care to join in, and you don't have to be from Calgary, I've actually got people coming in from out of the city and out of the province just to stop by. Should be a really good time. Stop by my website, get yourself registered to the event. Registration will be mandatory because I do have some restrictions on insurance, on capacity. This is insane, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Go to my website, sheldon4ward4.ca. So Marty, thanks for joining us. Eva, thanks for joining us. And unfortunately, Jeff is unable to be here with us. He was called away, so he won't be stopping into the call, and that's unfortunate. But Eva's got all the deets, and she'll be feeding that to us throughout the next 4.5 hours.
Yeah. and thanks for doing this, Sheldon, because it's been a crazy week, and there's like, if you look on the news, I mean, the news right now, everything is consumed with Carney and the Liberals and whatnot. But there's all these other important stories, and this one in particular. I mean, this one's an important story. So I'm glad we're giving Eva a chance to update everybody. Let's try and recapture some of the attention of the people.
Yeah, and that we have a lot of work to do in the province as well. Just a reminder, it's not just against the feds that we have issues with, but holding our government to account in the province as well.
Well, no, and that's actually an excellent point, because a lot of things are brought up, like, why isn't Smith doing this, and why isn't Smith doing this, and Smith is focused on something, but it's not the problems of Albertans. And when the shoe's on the other foot, they continuously say, well, things can happen simultaneously. And it's not that it's not that I believe that Smith is taking her eye off of the rest of the province to deal with the Trump inauguration and the possibility of the 25% tariffs. It's just that's where the media is focused, and so there is other things going on. So that's actually an excellent point, Marty, and of course this is exactly why we're doing this. And Eva, thanks for taking some time to do this. So there's two lawsuits going on right now, and I know that Kerry Sakamoto's got another day in court on, I believe it's January the 28th. And just so everybody can, can get updates on these, rathandcompany.com. So we're going to be talking about updates for the two class action lawsuits. We're going to start off with the business class action, then go on to Kerry's case. But if everybody goes to rathandcompany.com, and then you're going to see the drop down that gives the two class actions. One is the business class action, and the other is the COVID-19 vaccine class action. So if you know somebody that's got a business that was impacted throughout the lockdown period or throughout the COVID phase inside of the province, and this is specific to the province of Alberta, or if you know somebody that's been vaccine injured, please go to the site and make sure you just at least read through the updates, complete the details. That'll get onto Eva's desk. She'll contact you personally. I'm kidding.
No, I won't. Sure.
Sorry. No, but it is important that that we do get the people that were impacted inside of the province of Alberta dealt with accordingly. And there is two sides to this. So one is on the provincial side of things, which the class action for the business cases is very specific to the province of Alberta, if I understand this correctly. But the vaccine class action, the lawsuit is against both the province and the federal government. Am I correct in that, Eva?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe just because we made a joke of the I wouldn't be contacting everyone, and I just want to take a second to say why it isn't. Hi, Bonnie, nice to see you. That's why it's with the class action. There's one representative plaintiff that is kind of in charge of bringing the claim forward, and that's our client. And so, it would be impossible for a lawyer to be able to coordinate and communicate and take instructions from 1,000 different clients. So really, we don't communicate with all of the people. So I just thought I would say that anyway, because we do get tons and tons of forms being entered, and sometimes I think people expect a response, and right now we're just gaining that information, which we will need later, but our instructions come from the representative plaintiff, and they have a duty to act on behalf of all of the plaintiffs that might be affected. So yes, that's the first thing. And then I guess you wanted to do a quick update on the business class action first.
Yeah, because like the last big
Well, we were
news,
certified since we last talked.
the last big news that we got was that got certified. So whatever the province had brought out in that Alberta Health Services, or suing the province because Alberta Health Services is not a part of the province, turned out to be bullshit, right? I mean, I'd go for different words, but I mean, that was essentially a big part of their case, is that you can't sue the province. You should be suing Alberta Health Services, but Alberta Health Services is the province, so that's why you're not suing Alberta Health Services, but you're suing the province. But inside of the,
Can I just stop you there for 1 second?
Yeah.
Because you brought it up, and I think it would be nice to go over a little bit the court application there, and we could go back and forth, and maybe Marty can hear, because you were there. But since you brought that up, because it was a very big point and an argument that the province was bringing, and I don't want to forget this later, that's one of the arguments the province is bringing in respect of the other class action that we brought. So they're literally making the same argument again, even though they were just told by Justice Feasby that it was not an appropriate argument. So just thought I'd throw that out there right from the start. So we're basically going to be responding and defending the same thing, but in a different way. So I'll explain.
So that was on both cases, but there was a couple of other points that the province was disputing in the business class action. What were the other couple of points there, Eva?
Sheldon, let's let Eva give us an update. We're jumping all, my 2 bits, but let her give us an update.
Yeah,
all right.
That's
I'll
perfect.
step aside here.
It was early October that we were in court for 2 days, making arguments. So this was on we made a certification motion. So back it up a little bit. Rath and Company filed a statement of claim claiming negligence and a number of other causes of action, suing the provincial government on behalf of businesses in Alberta that had to abide by the health orders, which were found to be illegal by another judge in Alberta. So we already had an order by the Court of King's Bench saying that all of the public health mandates in Alberta were illegal. And so a class action was started on behalf of all of Alberta businesses. With a class action, the first application that the court generally hears is a certification application. We're telling the court that this makes sense to be certified as a class action so that 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 individual businesses don't go to court and make the same arguments about their losses. And so that was the certification application. We were in front of Justice Mosley in October 2nd and 3rd, which I think you were there for both days, Sheldon. And so what happened is the plaintiffs got to make their arguments first, to convince the court that this makes sense as a class action. Not just for that, there's a number of tests, but also we have to show that it's not likely that our claim will fail outright. Like, we have to show that we have a claim. Obviously, you can't just start a class action that's willy-nilly. So that was the two big things, is to show it makes sense as a class action, and that the causes of action, like negligence, that we suggested. So that we were saying that the province negligently made these public health orders, which they knew were ultra vires, that they didn't have the authority to make. And so as a result, everyone that abided by those orders should be compensated for the losses. We also had a claim for misfeasance. So that's misfeasance in public office. That's an elected official in public office not acting in the most appropriate manner, in, I guess, a bit more colloquial terms. And then we had some other things like expropriation.
I wrap my tongue around the word colloquial too. It shouldn't even be a word. Like, they could shorten that.
Like I said that properly. So
even Marty did the same thing. He was like,
I was
colloquial.
Something else. But what was interesting in that application is I think Justice Mosley's response and interactions with the province were very telling. He was challenging the province on some of these things. Like, the province actually made an argument to the court saying that it would be more responsible and it would make more sense if all these individual businesses went to court individually. And like the lawyer said, businesses are sophisticated. They can do that and go to court on their own. And we're already constrained with judicial time. I don't think any judge wants to hear 5 years worth of the same claim over and over. Either we have to decide once and for all if the province was negligent, or if the province acted in bad faith, there was misfeasance in public office, once and for all. If they did it in one case, it's for all of them. So then it's
Eva, quick question. Yeah. Do you have a sense already of how many people would be part of that class action? Like, when you say, the province doesn't want to hear like 100 times, is it 100? Is it 500? Can you give an order of magnitude?
Yeah, I think the last time I checked, and I could be wrong, I should have checked again. I think it's around 1,000 forms.
Wow.
That we have.
Okay.
And funny that the beginning, when we talked about this, Marty, you said, we have to bring back attention to this. There's been almost zero mainstream media attention on any of these claims. And I think that does an incredible disservice to the public, because these are class actions and there is a duty on us to some extent to notify the public. We're still not in that phase yet, but citizens should know that there's, number one, a class action. Number two, it was certified by the Court of King's Bench. One outfit, I think CTV News wrote a tiny little article, and Albertans should be aware of these things, and yet they're doing it, and then they wonder why nobody's supporting them. Like, hello. Anyway, so and what I was going to say is that's about 1,000 without a lot of press on it.
But actually, can I just if your class action was, for instance, against a big tobacco company, it would get a lot of attention, and I think it would. Do you have a sense of, is it because it's against the government that it's not getting attention, or am I speculating?
I think it's COVID. Anything COVID related, because
it's COVID and vaccine related, or COVID and mandate related on the business case.
Yeah, because this one is against the provincial government only. So you would think the mainstream media doesn't really love the UCP government. You would think that at least there would be an article or two. Nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
So I think it's because
That's
it's-
actually an excellent point that you bring up, Eva, because legacy media, and we're seeing this a lot right now, specifically right now with Premier Smith and her dealings with Trump, and her going against the rest of the provinces and not signing this document on harming our industries and natural resources. So, I mean, they're slamming the UCP government on this, but they're dead quiet on a class action lawsuit, or actually, sorry, 2 class action lawsuits against the province.
Yeah.
Because it's all COVID or COVID/vaccine related. And that's actually kind of insane. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, that's that.
important points, because we do need to make people aware of this. So and so many people aren't yet. They don't even know that the public health mandates, and I think this is maybe more of it. The public mandates in Alberta have been deemed illegal. And that's the one they don't want to ever talk about. Whenever I tell it to anyone, they're like, what? Really? I didn't know. So everything can be used in law courts as a precedent. That's why they're very helpful.
Including precedent in other jurisdictions, right? So if you're successful in Alberta, this could set a precedent for another province?
Potentially.
It could be. It gets a bit more tricky sometimes.
Okay.
This is based on our Public Health Act, and ours is a bit different than BC's, for example. So it depends on the nuance and why it was illegal. And anyway, we could go back to why it was found.
And this actually all goes back down to Judge Romaine's claim in that the province, and when I say the province, it's the government, acted incorrectly, and they tried to hide behind cabinet confidence instead of doing things in the proper way. So as I understood it, and as I've talked about it, is the class action on the business for the lockdown measures and things that impacted business is actually very specific to Alberta, given the actions that were done by the UCP government at the time. These can't be transferred over into other provinces unless it's proven to be the same. Is that correct?
Yes. And so, yeah, that's what I was just going to say. We know this because there was an action brought in Alberta and evidence came out showing that basically Dina Hinshaw gave evidence saying she gave Kenny and his cabinet a list of options and they chose. And under the Public Health Act, the only person in the Public Health Act that could be making decisions is Dr. Hinshaw. And she didn't make the decision. She allowed them to make the decision. And so how we made the arguments to Justice Feasby, and he agreed with our arguments, is that they were masking public health orders, doctors' orders, as political decisions. Because politicians made those decisions, but they would come out on stage saying, Dr. Hinshaw, these are public health, in public health safety, we have to make sure we're taking care of grandma. And that was all a camouflage for what really happened. And Justice Feasby was not buying any of the arguments that Alberta was making. And this is why I've been saying over and over again that the ultra vires decision in Alberta is so incredibly important. People were disheartened because that decision also said it was constitutional. But that doesn't mean anything when it's ultra vires. And Justice Feasby said it so specifically and so succinctly when he was asking questions of the provincial government. You're the one that makes the rules. The least you could do is follow your own rules, or you change the rules. The province is the one that enacts the rules. They made the Public Health Act. They could have changed it, but instead they went around it, like trying to make it look like this is the thing. You can't do that. That's misfeasance in public office. So Justice Feasby really honed in on that bad faith. He didn't say there was. So all we have right now is a certification order saying that there's enough questions here that we should be investigating this further on behalf of anybody that might be affected in Alberta. So
Eva, can I ask you a couple of questions? So So Judge Feasby is the judge who presided over your certification portion. Would that be the same judge that will preside over the trial itself or the case itself, or does it change judges after this?
It does. Yeah, that's my understanding. Yes.
What? There'll be a different judge?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. And then my second question is, you probably, I don't know if you can answer this, but is the province fighting you hard? Like, did you get the sense that the province is serious about us and putting a good A team on the other side? Like, when you refer to the province, is it an A team of lawyers, or how hard are they fighting?
So we have some other administrative parts of it right now, and I had to review what we did. So we filed a notice of application and 2 affidavits. They were 21 pages. In response, the provincial government submitted 1,000 pages.
Ouch.
And
Wow.
we had 2 weeks to read it all and cross-examine on it. So whether or not it's a strong defense, but it is a large defense. And we see that with they're throwing everything at us. And
So they can hit you with quality and quantity, but at least for sure they're hitting you with quantity at this point. Like they're okay.
Yeah.
And in the original, the 2 days that I'd attended in,
that's why I'm not a lawyer, by the way. I don't like reading.
It turns out there wasn't that much useful stuff in it, so we were able to get through it.
Good.
In the original 2 days when we'd sat through that, excuse me, Feasby was in certain aspects openly mocking the province, and they did seem to be, I'm going to say it, a B team. And I remember specifically a couple of times when Justice Feasby had to literally tell us to stop laughing or to keep quiet inside, because he would say something that would mock them so hard that us people, just kind of sitting through and watching, we're literally laughing at the either the case that was being presented or the response that they were giving. It was literally laughable to lay people.
Wow.
So that was the B team, and now what they're doing is they're trying to bury you in paperwork on on contesting the certification.
Well, no, that was before. So that those 1,000 pages were evidence filed in support of not having this certified. So we've gone through that.
Okay.
So that's
that's what you sent me, and I read through that in like 2 days, right? Okay.
And in that, it's all public. It's all on the website. But in that, and I am going to repeat this because it's so important. In that evidence, we had basically the top accountant for Alberta that gave an affidavit and provided a ton of, her affidavit and exhibits were 500 pages, just hers. But in her affidavit, again, this is the top accountant basically for the province of Alberta in the Treasury branch. She had 3 years listed of COVID relief and support. And our case is about private businesses. So I was looking at how much government grants were provided to the businesses. And I was able to, in one place, see it was about $650 million. And then when I tallied it up in another part of her own evidence, it was about $750 million. So close to $100 million difference in the top accountant's evidence from the province of Alberta. $100 million discrepancy that she didn't notice, the 3 lawyers that were with her didn't notice. And we asked her about it. And it was kind of like, it passed the public audit, and it seemed like a satisfactory answer for everyone. And I'm like, that's $100 million of Alberta's taxpayer money that nobody really seems to care about. And the second incredibly shocking component of that evidence was I tallied up the COVID programs and supports that she outlined for 3 years only. And it came out to be $13 billion with the B. And it listed things like irrigation services. How is that related to COVID support and programs. I don't know. That was like $1 billion or just under. And you could see that $13 billion, this was going to like municipalities and hospitals and public sector that needed those apparently flex, whatever.
Yeah,
that didn't work
basically
anyway.
when they were you're asking them for the or they're trying to prove that they spent monies for COVID, and they're throwing anything and everything they can at it. I mean, they probably had a hospital that was due for renovation regardless 3 years ago, and they it happened to be during COVID, and they put it on the list for you. But I remember, but one thing I remember you talking about, what that you also uncovered that you thought was fascinating, what I think is fascinating, is that the government spent more money on COVID relief for government people and government branches than they did on the private sector.
This is exactly it. So that $13 billion, it was said COVID programs and support, and it's like municipalities. And so that's how much they dedicated to the plexiglass and the masks and hand sanitizers and employment, whatever. We don't know because it was just kind of general topics. And then for the private sector, $750 or $650 million, we don't really know for sure.
Wow. Yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, you're talking about government accountants, like it's, you know, you're not getting the cream of the cream there. I mean, in the private sector, if I was hiring somebody to audit my financial statements and they were off by $100 million or $100 billion, I'd fire them the next day. So yeah,
obviously.
See now, and I'm going to bring up something, and this is because I've done with or dealt with contracting with the provincial government. So through a previous job, we'd installed I'm going to call them life supporting devices inside of hospitals, and we'd also done a number of jobs with the province, but it's all basically on provincial dollars. So one of the things, and I'm not trying to rationalize this for the province, but I am going to try and rationalize this for the people that are in these places, is that they're given a budget that they have to abide by. So, if they need upgrades or if they need service or if they need to fix something, there is a max sized PO that they're allowed to issue. And I believe at the time when I was in the seat, that number was $10,000. So if it exceeded $10,000, they would have to go through another layer of approval before that would get done. Now, in these cases, if it was like $12 or $13 or $14,000, instead of putting it on a single invoice, we could break it up into two, and they would specify it as two different cases. So there's a lot of these projects that are outstanding inside of the province. It's just the approval process is so cumbersome.
Yeah, and you're describing something that in the private sector, in the industry that I work, that's illegal. I mean, if like my signing authority is $25,000, my boss is $100,000, and if I want to spend $100,000, I can't give him 4 purchase orders of $25,000. My auditors would absolutely. But we're getting distracted. So. And again, I'm just to kind of lend a little insight into. There are some things inside of the province that could use some attention, and I mean, call it provincial, call it municipal, even call it federal at some levels. There are some cumbersome processes where, when we're looking at programs where Canada has spent $20 million in teaching people in foreign countries to not shit on beaches, while we still have projects that could service the taxpayers, the constituents, the Canadian citizens.
Well, at that point, Sheldon,
we need to address some of these things. I mean, that's a whole other conversation.
But
I just thought I'd throw it in.
I do appreciate it because I find that sometimes the reason that these 2 statement of claims and class actions have been filed, because actual damages have happened to these people. The businesses really were closed down and they were incredibly affected financially, emotionally, and it seems like the provincial government is not even considering it. And unfortunately, Albertans aren't really rallying around their own local businesses and neighbors and friends. So I don't know why we don't have that in Alberta a little bit more. And I think that you make a good point, because there are terrible spending, ridiculous spending all over with our taxpayer money. Yet when people are harmed, our own neighbors, our favorite businesses are harmed, we don't really seem to say anything. And I find that a bit strange.
Well, I look at the numbers of Alberta, but they're big. But then I look at the federal numbers; they're even bigger. In the federal government, in the year 2020, there's $200 billion that's just loosely allocated to COVID. And even the auditor general said, I have no idea what this is. Like, when they're like, it's ArriveCan, it's this, it's that, but like all layers of government during COVID use COVID as an excuse to just overspend. And whenever, like, all controls went by the wayside, somebody would just show up and say, yeah, I need $100 million to do this. And it was granted. But anyways, so for your first class action, it's certified. And at this point, that's, what else do you want to say about that one?
So yeah, the whole point was that Justice Feasby really saw that there was a need to move this forward. And so he certified it in less than a month. We got our decision, I think it was October 31st. We were before him October 2nd and 3rd. And then the province appealed it. The province appealed it on everything, including, again, that this is not reasonable. It shouldn't be a class action, and that every individual complainant should go on their own. Chris Scott of the Whistle Stop Cafe was found by Justice Feasby to be a reasonable representative plaintiff. They've appealed that, which I think is a little bit silly, because just so you know, it really is just a figurehead, that person. We could literally swap it out with anybody else. But the fact that Alberta is taking issue with a man that obviously we all know his business was closed down because he was more vocal about it. But it's just a figurehead, really, it just needs to be any business owner, and in his case, a sole proprietorship. So that I just think is a little bit interesting, that the government is spending taxpayers' money to fight on every single component of the decision, basically.
And
so
on that,
whether or not that makes sense, I don't know. But if Albertans don't believe that that's right, perhaps they should start doing something about it.
just looping back to the last conversation that we had when Jeff was on, he'd mentioned that, he went into, he was talking with somebody openly, and they had, I think it was a clinic, like a chiropractic clinic. And he said, could you possibly estimate what your losses were for this period of time? And I'm not going to claim to know the exact figures. And he'd say, and the response to Jeff from whoever had this clinic was, yeah, we made $25,000 a month. We still have our expenses, but we don't have that same amount of money coming in. If we were closed down for 3 months, that figure looks like $75,000. And again, it's not the figures. It is that businesses were actually impacted by this, and they could actually see this. And the next biggest part about this is because the federal government had actually, and I think the provincial government too, had actually offered these small chunks of change, these little, we'll give you a couple of bucks here, and that should tie you over.
Yeah.
We don't realize the differentiation between Whistle Stop Cafe and Mirror, Alberta, which not a lot of people will drive through. I mean, it's not Red Deer, it's not Gasoline Alley, A&W. It's Mirror, Alberta. It's like 45 minutes off the main highway. But when looking at this, I mean, this is a small business class action, and small business is very specific. By number of people, by employment size, and by
so it's any business that lost is, and actually right now it's sole proprietors, and there's more to come on that topic, but it isn't based on how many people. It's based on the type of business. But one thing, maybe, sorry, go ahead.
No, and we talked about this last time. The dollar impact two businesses, like, yeah, you can do the math. You can ask each individual business, how much do you think you lost because of COVID? I did the back of the envelope calculation. It's huge. Like it's in the 20 and $30 billion range. You can even see it in Alberta's GDP. I mean, the numbers are published, even the government's own number. At some point, when you guys get into that real exploration of the cost, you're going to see that, Alberta's GDP is $500 billion a year. And during COVID, it dropped to like, 400 billion. So there's $100 billion of business that disappeared for an entire year. Yeah. So, it's order of magnitude. It's a big number. I can understand why the government wants to fight it because, they technically they could be on the hook to have to compensate people to the tune of a lot of money.
Yeah. And it goes back in the province, obviously, with business owners. But yeah, like the $13 billion went somewhere in 3 years. They were able to allocate that somewhere. But one thing I thought you guys would really like too, and important for the audience to hear, is there were a couple experts as well that were presented for the evidence. And one was an economist, and he was like, okay, well, it's going to be a bit hard to figure out exactly how much and all this stuff, which that's their whole job. I'm pretty sure you would agree. But then he said, we wouldn't know exactly how much had to do with the mandates or the fear of going out. And then we asked, who was it that was causing the fear? Oh, it turns out it's also the government. So, but like
but I mean, I do this all day long, looking at numbers, looking at data. I can tell you there's like, if the whistle stop wants to know how much they lost during COVID, they'll be able to tell you. I mean, all I have to do is ask them for their tax return from the year 2020, the year 2021, 22, 23. And when you see a drop, you go, boom, there it is. Like, I mean, and a judge might. What's that?
There's even government documents that show how much they made 1 year to the next.
Absolutely. I mean, I do it all. You can. The average T1 returns are available online on Stats Canada, and I can pour through them and see how salaries and taxes dropped for a period during COVID. It's all there. I
was laughing because it's actually on government documents. That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
It's like that's.
Call me when you need the numbers someday, and I'll pour over through them. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Now, Eva, and sorry, I don't want to cut you off here, Marty, but I do want to make sure that, we're kind of including everybody inside of the conversation here. There are a lot of businesses that couldn't survive the lockdown period and ended up either having to close their doors or sell off their businesses, which is where Ingram actually falls. She had to take a number of different sacrifices. So I want to make sure that everybody understands is it's not just people who lost some revenue. Your class action is also about the people that had to sell their homes, had to close down their businesses in order to try and just eke out a living during this period. Can you go into just a little bit of detail? I just want to make sure, because this is so important to people inside of Alberta, where, some will get lost in, well, I don't have my business, I can't sue anymore, I'm not a part of this anymore. But that's actually patently false, because if they did have a business where they did lose money, and if they did lose their business during this time, they're also included as a part of this class action. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, so it does get a little complicated, but I'm going to say yes for now, and they should register through the online, because this is just the beginning, and this is going to take a long time. You could revive a business through very easily at the registrars up to 10 years from when it was dissolved. So that's just an administrative issue, but yeah, like this is where the notification information, and once we get to that stage and get an idea of what the claim is, what we actually, because this is just the first stage, that there are common issues. That's what the certification decision says. There's common issues for the court to hear, so it's not hearing a million different cases at the same time. That's what we've got, and that's what the province has appealed.
So it's important that people that not only lost some revenue during this time, but also lost their businesses or had to go into creative financing, we'll call it, or do whatever they had to do, is to make sure that they go to, and it's rathandcompany.com. Go over to the class actions tab and look under business class actions to submit their information. Now, I mean, for some people, they're going to look at this as a last bit of hope. But inside of a country where one of the number one leading of causes of death is medically assisted suicide, in that people are actually going to commit suicide as a source of, the cure for their livelihood or their lives right now in the places that there are. I mean, this might seem like a stretch, but there is a some light at the end of the tunnel, right?
Well,
I went out there, Marty. I did it.
we hope we can help compensate some of the losses that people incurred, because I think that the government screwed up. It was found to be illegal, and businesses deserve compensation for the losses they incurred. 100%.
Yeah. And what? So it's being appealed. Have you gotten? Who's going to review the appeal? Is that a different judge? Like,
it goes to the higher court, and it probably will be through. The interesting and nice thing is we can continue on with our certification and our process while that's happening. So it doesn't stop it. It just adds another layer to it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that one, so are we caught up on that one, on the business class action, or is there another?
Yeah. No, the only last thing is that on February 13th, we're going to be before Justice Feasby for a case management conference, talking about some of the things that arose from his decisions. Like, we need to have a certification order, and some other things that I don't have at the top of my head. But anyway, we're going to be in front of him. So you're welcome to come to that one, February 13th.
Remind us a day or two before that, and we'll try and get a few people. Leave your copies at home.
and is this and take your hat off? Is this one of those? It could be an hour, or it could be the entire day.
This one is just an hour. Yeah,
it's just an hour.
13th. Yeah.
So it's not a big thing. And I am going to remind everybody that does go down to the courthouse if it's in a morning appointment. And as Marty stated, is some of the clerks are not fond of you wearing a hat or bringing a coffee in. But if you are down there at the courthouse and you go in for the breakfast combo at the courthouse, you do get some tasty hash browns, a good little sandwich. I do recommend the sausage patty, and then you get a small coffee that goes along with it. So, hey, you know what? People need to know these things. Don't eat before you go down. It's $10, and inside of downtown Calgary, inside of the courthouse, I mean, they you'd figure that'd be like a $35 touch. It's $10. It's actually a reasonable deal. And it's cooked for you right there on the spot. You can see them whipping
now
this up.
Now on to our next case.
But no. Now on to our next case. So, and this all really goes around Kerry Sakamoto, but it is still a class action. Now, if you can clear something up for me on the business class action, you included two businesses, Whistle Stop and Ingram's Gym. Why didn't you need to have two people that were vaccine injured to show the pattern for the vaccine injury class action? Sorry.
We didn't in the first case. They had different business structures, and it all depends on how we define the class, and there could be subclasses, and this could come out later. It doesn't all have to be at first. And on the 13th, you'll learn a little bit more about that one on the business class action. With Kerry's case, it's about vaccine injured individuals, and so we needed one individual to represent.
Because you're not basing it on the degree of injury or anything like that. If you're vaccine injured, that's it. That's the threshold.
That's the class. Yeah. So it's how we could define the class, and she fits the class, and that's all you needed. So
You could have
on
done
the-
multiple classes. You could have done males that are vaccine injured, women that are vaccine injured, children potentially, right? But for you chose one class, and that's
yeah,
probably
well,
simple enough, probably
most-
complicated enough, and actually.
in
See, and
all
I
we
from
could
what
have
I'd read,
people that passed away, people that were injured mentally and physically, there could have been anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Sheldon.
yeah, no, it just from what I'd read in the documents that you'd sent over to me, is it seemed like 2 was the pre-qualifier. You had to show that there was at least 2. And I'm not saying that you're lying to me, or I'm just saying it was a misunderstanding, and that's the reason that I wanted to clear this up,
Yeah.
because it seemed
Yeah.
like a class action had to be specific to at least 2 businesses or 2
I think
plaintiffs.
we have to be able to show, I think, that it would represent more than 2 people, I think. But yeah, that's maybe what you're thinking.
And that's it. It had to represent more than 2 people, and I just thought that's where that 2 came in, and that's why I wondered about Carrie's case, because she is the rock star inside of this thing. Terrible tragedy that's happened to her family, and her livelihood. So, where are we with Carrie's case right now?
Right. So you guys attended the brief presentation, the hearing that we were at, case management hearing before Justice Stilts in October. I think that was October 16th. And you probably recall that there was a little bit of back and forth because the province was making a suggestion and wanted to bring an application that kind of stalls the certification motion that we filed. So we filed exactly the same way we did it on the Ingram. We filed a statement of claim, then we file a motion for certification to tell the judge to turn this into a certification, and these are the reasons why. And the province said, no, we're not doing this because AHS should be the ones that are the defendants, not the province, and none of these claims are valid and they will be struck out, which literally were basically their same strong arguments in the business class action. So we were hoping to be able to, at that conversation with Justice Dilts, basically say, the province tried this before. It's exactly the same we just dealt with 2 weeks ago. It didn't fly then. It shouldn't fly now. And Justice Dilts was not prepared to hear that now. So the province filed a brief, and this is all available online on the COVID class action. Sometimes I get distracted by reading what was going on, but I shouldn't read those. And then the federal government did the same thing, is they drafted a brief and we responded. And so when we're going to be in court at the end of this month, February 28, it's to go through that sequencing application. So the province has made a pitch to the court to say, we can't go through the certification motion, which is what happened in Ingram. We have to have a pre-hearing to first decide whether or not Alberta is the appropriate defendant and not AHS. And second of all the claims are going to be struck. There's no chance that this is going to go forward. And they have to be able to prove that we have zero chance that our negligence claim is going to be struck, that our misfeasance in public office claim will be struck, that there's no evidence for it. There's no evidence to show that there was a conspiracy to commit assault, because that was one of our claims. So that's what they're doing. They want to have a whole, even though, and so in our brief, and this is what we'll be arguing before Justice Dilts, this is exactly the point of the certification application. Our brief is available. It's quite comprehensive. So to give an example, one of the reasons that this would be appropriate is where there's a limitations issue. So if we brought the claim too late, past the 2 years you're allowed to sue somebody, then the defendants can say, no, we're not going to go through the whole certification application. We're going to have a pre-hearing because they're out of time. And we're not going to go through all of the expense and time. And one of the comments that the province said is that we don't want to go through the cost of going through this. This is the province up against, one vaccine injured person, and to justify their resources against I always find that incredibly offensive. And it's in our brief. There was something else. If you guys have a question, there was something else that was also just hard to swallow, but if you have questions, I'm happy to answer as I'm looking through our brief too.
Yeah, so there was this that came up. This would set a precedent for the rest of the world. So, and this is, I mean, we're not looking at the ultra vires of,
No.
the inappropriate conduct by the province, because the vaccine injury isn't specifically against the province; it's against the province and the federal government at the same time.
Yeah, and I should probably explain our claim a bit, because I think it's really interesting, and I don't think anywhere else they've seen it. So literally our claim is for the government misrepresenting the vaccine as safe, effective, and interchangeable. Because we all saw it over and over, repeatedly, those things. And what are we provided in evidence? So we put, again, a little bit of evidence, not a lot, because this isn't the evidentiary portion, but we had to show we have a claim. So in order to show that it wasn't safe or effective, we relied on the Pfizer contracts that are available publicly, because that's in there. They say that we don't know if this is safe, we don't know if this is effective, and that's in the contract. In all of the monographs, so the
folded papers inside the box, the pill box.
Obviously, it says, do not interchange this with other vaccines. We don't know what's going to happen. Understandably, they would put that in because they don't know. Nobody's had time to test it. So our claim is they made these representations that very clearly, if you looked at basic information, it wasn't factual. So how were you able to say that? And the second component to that is, not only that, is then you censored and suppressed information about vaccine injuries. So how was somebody supposed to make an informed decision? Oh, and this is another thing that the province added to this in their brief. If you read through it, they said, we're not the ones that injected anyone.
No.
We didn't cause injury. And so in our brief, in response, we said, the doctors also heard your messaging. They also were misinformed by your messaging. So, and you don't have to convince a judge or anybody that your client got injured. That's an established fact. Yes.
You're going after the government for, in layman's term, for false advertising. They told doctors, they told us, the public, that this thing was safe. So some people said, okay, well, if the government says it's good, then roll up my sleeve. And not only did they tell us it was good, but they were withholding information once they started knowing that it wasn't good, and they were withholding information that would have allowed us to make our own decisions. So yeah, okay, wow, you got a strong case. And to that person who asked the question, is it a precedent? It might not be a precedent in legal sense, but if one government gets found guilty for misadvertising a product as being that's ineffective, then by definition, all the other governments that did the same thing with the same product are guilty of the same offense. So yeah.
So just to break this out here, sorry, Eva.
It would go across the country on the Fed side. Yeah.
So on this is the vaccine injury case. Because of what you guys have outlined, going against the province and going against the federal government, is very different than the business case, where it is specific against the province because of ultra vires. Yeah. So that's where the difference in precedence really comes in. So if you're successful in this one, this is where the rest of the country, all the provinces, can open up on the same thing. Now, there was one question, and I know you might have a tough time answering this. Sorry, let's get the right question here.
Can we get back to? Okay.
is there a class action for people that didn't fall for the pandemic but still lost their livelihood? So
Can we
one
talk
of these,
that for a second? Because I do want to say, I just want to talk a little bit more about what Marty said when he said false advertisement. Because this is
absolutely,
very important. And this
is your call, man.
thank
It's
you.
your
Well, I'm
call.
taking charge. And so that's why this is
And
important.
I'm selling sandwiches at the courthouse downtown Calgary.
Okay. Yes, for $9.
Go.
So this is the argument both the province and the federal government are making in saying that it will be struck, because they're using precedence on cigarette advertisement in Canada. So one of the biggest cases that they're relying on, it was a negligent misrepresentation, that's the legal terms for this, is a company was selling the light cigarettes, and the province was saying that those were not as
Safer.
harmful.
Yeah.
Not as harmful. I don't know if they use the word safer. I can't remember. And so there was a lawsuit between the federal government and the tobacco company. And so there's the arguments the tobacco company were saying is that a lot of these same arguments were being made, but everything you said, Marty, is that they weren't coercing people to take cigarettes. They weren't suppressing information about the harmful effects, but they're relying on a precedent on cigarette smoking, where when the federal government stamped one as less harmful than the other, they're trying to use that precedent to show that negligence misrepresentation doesn't apply to products that the federal government has approved of.
Right. And then
this is a totally different case, a totally different example.
Yeah, it's a different example. And you're also reminding me that's part of the reason you guys made the decision to not go after the vaccine manufacturer for that reason as well, right? The vaccine manufacturer, if I understand correctly, they even said, hey, we don't know what this thing is. Like we're selling it under emergency measures and under a lot of advisement and buyer beware. So they protected themselves for potential liability. So is that why you're not going after the vaccine manufacturers?
Yeah. And that's the other component of the cigarette thing, is who's advertising the cigarettes. It's not the government. It was so the cigarette companies were able to advertise the less harmful ones as less harmful because the government approved them as less harmful. But in this case, they didn't advertise them. It was the government that advertised them. So it's a totally different case. And like, what is it to? We could have sued. It complicates things if you're going to go after the pharmaceutical company. But in this case, the government took ownership of this product. It advertised this product ad nauseum to the Canadian people or the Alberta people on behalf of the provincial government, and suppressed the injuries and coerced thetheir own people.
Wow.
This is nothing to do with like taking a cigarette because you want a cigarette. So yeah, that's what, and they're relying on those precedents to say this is going to be struck.
Yeah, no, it's not the same. Yeah, nobody ever threatened to take away my job if I didn't have a cigarette.
Yeah, because the government can be negligent in those other cases, but here I think we're going to, number one, show that that's not the same standard of negligence on a misrepresentation. But number two, our other claim is misfeasance in public office, just like in Ingram. You guys went too far. You pushed people too much. You hid, you lied, and there has to be some accountability here. You have to take ownership. You can't just think you're doing the best for the people and say, okay, everyone, we did our best. And that's kind of what the government is trying to suggest is okay.
Yeah, and ironically, looping this in, smoking actually kept you safer from COVID than not smoking. So I mean, like,
Right now.
sorry, I didn't want to cut you off there, Marty. I just
No,
I
it's
wanted to poke
yeah.
that in.
There is
the
some
whole
evidence that nicotine is helpful in preventing COVID, but no, my only thought that I was going to add is, you know, I was willing, you know, I followed what was happening very closely in the statistics and stuff like that, and yes, like in the first few months of the pandemic and the first few weeks of rolling out the vaccine, I'm willing to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. But then at some point, when the evidence starts mounting, you lose that benefit of the doubt from me. And then I even witnessed the government suppressing information. Me and Sheldon witnessed it. I mean, you know, they used to publish data on admissions to the hospital and into ICUs and deaths, and they used to cross-reference it to their vaccine status. And then the government suddenly stopped doing that. And to me, that was a giant red flag when they start doing that. I mean, you don't want me to even question their data. I went as far as writing a letter to the government saying, can we have the data so we can at least look at it ourselves? And their answer to me was, you're probably not qualified to understand the data. I'm like, no, that's not your decision, man. Like, I want the data, and maybe I'll take the data and send it anyways. So okay, so that's so.
So just to let you know, like, I have the test of misconduct in public office, and that was Justice Feasby gave us a nice test there. And so to show misfeasance in public office, there's two different tests, and one is intent to harm an individual, class of individuals, which is satisfied by either an actual intention to harm, so if they actually intended to harm people, or actual knowledge that harm will result, or reckless indifference or willful blindness to the harm that can be foreseen to result. And at this point, I don't know how they can say that they didn't know and they weren't willfully blind to the harms, because.
So on that aspect, do you have a precedent? Like, I didn't read your briefs or whatever, but do you have an example of a government in the past somewhere else that exhibited whatever this malfeasance?
So if you look back, have we ever seen the government go so crazy?
No.
Yeah, so we don't
So
have
it's tough
that.
to find a precedent.
Yeah, and that's okay, because you don't need to have a precedent to like show
Always,
it.
right. You can set a new precedent. Got it.
Well, the precedent is there. The test is already there. It's just, do we satisfy it with the evidence that we have? And I think we do. I think we have.
Yeah. Just thinking about it right now, I'm having a hard time thinking of. There were so many. What do I call them? We had so many of our rights trampled during the last 3 years that it's hard to imagine. I can't find examples that were as bad as what we witnessed in the last 3 years. I'm trying to think of times in history where our governments. I mean, if I'm a Native person, I think I could probably find examples of the governments doing something towards me that were malfeasance or whatever. But yeah, interesting.
And so those are the cases that you do see. There's also, like, sometimes inmates and bad living standards there, or seniors homes and things like that. So you will see that argument being made there a little bit. Veteran services, sometimes they have strong claims, and I'm sure they did win some, but those are, quite specific. So we wouldn't, the evidence, the precedents from that wouldn't really help. The test is what we need, and we just need to satisfy with our evidence that test.
Yeah. I mean, there was, if I think back throughout history, there was some weird barbaric, the medical world has had some weird barbaric things in the past, right? I mean, we had governments in the past that said, hey, electric shocks are fine, and hey, lobotomies are fine. So it's happened, but never on this scale. Like what happened during COVID to me was on an unprecedented scale. So, yeah.
Well, actually, if you go back to Ansel Keys and his theory on dietary consumption, you'd find out that the largest thing that we've been lied to and it's been promoted is the either the SAD diet, which is the standard American diet, which is also known as the Canadian food pyramid. So these things do actually go. It's just there's not enough conversations or not enough focus that's based on these. And some of these things that we may see as RFK, joins Trump in 3 days. But for what we've seen on a global scale inside of a shortened timeline, I mean, Ansel Keys was back in the 60s. I mean, we're talking about 70 years worth of data. Whereas what we're looking at for COVID basically was like a 3-year of the entire planet getting ass pommeled by lunatics.
You know where the American Food Guide came from, right? The first one in World War II, when the Americans were recruiting in mass to go fight the Germans and the Japanese, they quickly realized that the typical American teen, who 18-year-old, was too skinny and could barely meet the rigorous demands of being a soldier. And so they quickly came up with a food guide, and they designed to fatten up the American quickly. So it's an interesting story. Wow. Yeah, I mean, eating sugars and seed oils and stuff like that, that's not for us, man. It's bad for us.
Yeah, this is just, I hope the tip.
That's a whole other class of lawsuits. Yeah. I'm sure that there have been sugar law and fluoride. Fluoride's bad for us, Sheldon.
Fluoride! So. We're going to do fluoride next.
No, we did fluoride last week. No more fluoride.
Before we get there, because Sheldon, you disappeared for a second. So I talked about the test of misfeasance in public office. And the test is intent to harm an individual or class of individuals, which can be satisfied by a number of things. But one is actual knowledge that the harm will result, or reckless indifference or willful blindness to the harm. So let's just think about that for a second. They said it was safe and effective, but did they have actual knowledge that the harm will result? They set up vaccine compensation support programs. They knew harm could happen. So obviously, they knew it would happen, but they went around saying it was safe, effective, and interchangeable. Those were lies. That was representations they made that were incorrect, and we want to hold them account for those misrepresentations.
I'm gonna go through this because not a lot of people are aware. Is the official date when vaccines rolled out inside of Canada was Marty?
December
14th.
2021.
No,
December 14th. No, it was December 14th, 2020.
Yeah.
2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first Health Canada warning on the vaccines came out 2 days prior. It was on December 12th, 2020. Just want to make sure that everybody understands that. The government knew that there were going to be reactions to the vaccines 2 days prior, and they issued a public warning 2 days before the first arms were jabbed. Inside of the first day when the vaccines hit on December 14th, there were only 8 people, according to the statistics that were provided, that were actually injected. On that same day, 60 people had died from COVID-associated mortality. Sorry,
there were so many of those kinds of anomalies during COVID that it was hard for the government to hide it, right? Like me and Sheldon spent a lot of time finding that. I mean, we would find discrepancies in data all the time. And then people would find all sorts of other weird things, like contracts that had been made with Pfizer and Moderna, like before the vaccines. And like money's put aside in budgets for the injury programs and campaigns and things like that. So yeah, you guys are all uncover that, and when you're anytime you're looking for a little bit of evidence or something, like reach out to us, because there's lots of guys who have screenshots of everything that happened, and gals.
Well, and that's helpful because that's the connection that we didn't inject somebody with it, but our claim is not about the injection, and we're not our claim is not about the approval process, because that's where other lawyers go to, and other claims have gone, that they're reviewing the regulatory process. We're not looking at that. You made very specific claims over and over and over again about these products.
Well, look at our government. They held a lottery. They did a lottery and they offered millions of dollars to people to take the vaccine. You don't think that's kind of like, yeah, that's that's pretty bold. They gave credit cards to everyone. Like, hey, take your second vaccine. We'll give you $100 credit card preloaded. The advertising was insane. And when I go on the internet today and we try and find that advertising, it's all gone. But there's people who took screenshots of bus stops and things like that with the billboards. I mean, we were, boy, they're trying to suppress some of this information. But luckily, I always say this, luckily, God bless one thing in government, and that's clerks who do their jobs every day and who file reports and file information. And as much as they try to go through and scrub the past and get rid of that information, a lot of it is still there, and we'll uncover it if you need it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
So, and here's one of the big things, and I can't stop sharing this enough, because Visp says one story, Canvas says another story. Canvas is closer to the reality of things, but it still doesn't even scratch the surface as to the number of injuries that went on inside of Canada. So the statistics that I pulled up are actually from Statistics Canada or Public Health Canada, and this is over a year ago. This is the last time this report was updated.
Yeah.
Over 1 year ago. At that time, close to 60,000 Canadians had suffered from an adverse reaction. But here's the big part right here. 11,000 people, actually close to 12,000 people, 11,702 people suffered from and this might not be to the same extent as Kerry Sakamoto, but this was classified as a serious adverse reaction. Now, Marty, both you and me have made it to the VIS program, and we've seen the updates, which were actually late. And here's the tragic part of this, is that we see that right here, there's 11,702 people that have suffered from a serious adverse reaction. And this started when the VIS program started. Only 209 people inside of the entire country of Canada. This isn't Alberta. This is the entire country of 41 million people have been paid out for their vaccine injuries. The total that's been paid out is $16 million, which works out to be about $80,000. Now, if you're Kerry Sakamoto here, and then you're now Kerry Sakamoto here, does $80,000 make you whole again? And this is what I find as the most tragic part of this. Sorry, because I can't stop bringing this up. And how negligent our government is, the reason that you should be going after the feds and the province, because the province should be going after the feds too. They withheld the information. And this is so tragic and so important that we kind of cover these things. Sorry, go ahead, Eva.
I would prefer if Alberta government took that kind of position on behalf of its citizens instead of fighting its citizens again. But that's not the route they chose to take, unfortunately.
Now, there was something that you'd brought up, and this was in side conversations, where you said that those people that are no longer members of Legislative Assembly, they're not necessarily off of the hook because of something that you'd brought up. So if I can get you to talk about that for a quick second, because I think this is going to be important, because, I mean, yourself, myself, Marty, I mean, we're all on the same page here. We're all to holding governments to account. And that's despite the fact that I may be actually joining government as a member of the municipal council. Marty has promised that he will help keep me on the right side of things over breakfast. We're going to do another A&W breakfast. You'll have to be in town for these things, Eva. It was a great conversation. It was a fucking fantastic time.
Eva's still employed. We don't sit down with employed people. The A&W Breakfast Club is for old retired people. That's
Anyways, go ahead.
So this is a great point, and thanks for reminding me, because one of the big things you might have remembered at Justice Feesby's is we sued the province of Alberta. And in this case with Kerry Sakamoto, we sued the province and the federal government. So Justice Feesby on our cause of action on misfeasance in public office, he asked us if we were not supposed to be naming individual members, elected officials, because it wasn't Alberta that was causing this misfeasance. Obviously, it's individual members like Kenny and his cabinet, but we don't know who those people are. We haven't been able to get that kind of information. In the earlier action on Ingram, specifically, Jeff had asked for that, but the province said that's protected cabinet confidentiality. We can't give you any of that. So we don't know who made those decisions. So how are you supposed to name someone? But in any event, we were able to satisfy Justice Feesby that we don't need to name these people individually at this stage. We can always add them later. And what's really interesting on misfeasance in public office, if they're named individually, they're individually responsible. Whereas the rest of the claim is against the province of Alberta. So a court can say that former Premier Kenny is responsible as well, personally. I don't expect it will go that far because I would expect the province to intervene before that would happen, because it would be very difficult to allow that to happen.
Right. Yeah, throwing him in a noose.
Now on that line, so you said that the case as it is right now is against the province and the federal government. And is it the province that's coming back and saying your case should be against AHS? Or where did I hear that?
The same arguments that they made in Ingram in Sakamoto's case.
That's interesting. So what do you think they hope to achieve by doing that? Like, are they trying to go and say that AHS is more likely to be excused for trying to do something correctly, even though it didn't happen correctly? I don't know. Like, why do you think they're going? Or maybe let me put it another way. You're going after the province because the buck stops there, or what's the argument there?
That's why we're doing it. Yes, the buck stops with the province, and everybody really is under the AHS gets funding from the province. Alberta can say, we're not doing this, but they're the ones that incentivize. They're the ones that coerced as well. They're the ones that put in the mandate. Right. So there's a lot of reasons that they should be there, but AHS, and that's what we found in Ingram. AHS is a subsidiary of Alberta anyway. But why they're making that argument? Unfortunately, this is why I want to speak to Albertans and Canadians for them to understand that how important it is to talk to your elected officials. What we find that government lawyers do is because they kind of have. Whenever you do that right by the mic there, Sheldon.
I know you have to pee. Sorry.
They basically have endless resources to take all of these administrative steps that most private litigants just don't have the money, the resources, the time to do. But they take every step possible, whether or not often it makes sense, whether or not it's successful. So to make the same argument again, and they're trying to say that that's not exactly what Justice Feesby said, it was a bit different, but ultimately we know what he was saying. Again, they're taking that position. In terms of this whole sequencing application, we think it's just a delay tactic. And we've said that in our brief.
Can I say a couple of things here? And Marty, I know you were kind of amping up onto something. But on Alberta Health Services is a separate entity from the province. One of the first things that Premier Smith did when she was elected Premier of the province was fire the board.
Yes.
So, to try and differentiate the two identities when the Premier of the province can walk in and just say, you're all fired, it's a really tough case to make in saying, yeah, that's not going to go on. The other thing that I
This is quoted from Justice Feasby when he was there, and this is in our brief. And I do not think that the lawyers for the government of Alberta should be standing in front of our courts and saying with a straight face that
the straight
AHS
face,
is anything but a creation of the government.
Right.
and that's exactly correct. And we all openly, like, it was open mouth guffaw at that point, and like he had to wait like 60 seconds after that before he could continue on, because we were all laughing at that. The second thing is the delays in these things, and then you know, I believe that this is really tragic, but I can't help continue to bring this up. Inside of Canada, I believe publicly, you know, that's been broadcast through even legacy media, is there have been at least 3 people who have opted for MAID because they can't get medical attentions to deal with the injuries that they've suffered from the vaccines. The delay tactics, in my opinion, and I'm not going to claim to be a lawyer or a medical practitioner, but it seems to be trying to run out the clock on the people that are injured. So if everybody dies before they can be included in a lawsuit, it's a much smaller lawsuit. And that's my second point. Those are the only 2 things that I had to add to that. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I think people that died may remain. We still have to figure out whether or not that's going to, how we manage that. But in terms of anybody injured, there's still a lot of people that are injured that it's not as severe. But I can give a little bit of background with Carrie's cases. She went through 8 case managers, and that was the last count I had through that vaccine injury support program. Like, how
Can you define case managers? I'm sorry.
You know, like a WCB claim. So that was her.
Okay.
The person that was managing the claim on her behalf with the government through that program. And the last that I remember, she was at number 8. So what kind, and this is like, what, 3 years?
Well, that program, you know, Sheldon showed a little bit of statistics on that program. That program is an administrative pit of, like, money pit. It's crazy. You know, the program got like $78 million in the last 3 years, and has issued whatever, like $10 million in claims. I mean, anybody who's dealt with the WCB knows anybody who's dealt with any insurance company knows that they're tough, right? But I think that program takes the cake. I mean, your odds of getting a penny out of that program, it's right there in the statistics.
I think actually Eva was the one that actually made the biggest light of this thing, because how much of the funding actually went towards dispensing the funding versus the funding that actually went out to the injured? Like, it was like 60 or 70% of the funding.
Yeah.
8%. And that was Tamara Ugolini with Rebel. She was uncovering all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm sorry, what were the numbers actually, or do you remember off the top of your head?
I think it was about 68% went to administering the program.
Yeah, which is embarrassing. So, I mean, I'm going to pull up this screen one more time, just because, again, I've got to keep hammering this so that people really get a true sense of what's going on here.
And if you're showing the vaccine injury one, this is actually the Can I add even more that I don't know if you guys know this? If this is based only on Canada numbers, these numbers only come from when the doctor submits the injury. So the doctor has to go through a pretty hard to manage and navigate program and form that takes at minimum an hour. It could be rejected for administrative reasons. In the United States, if I believe I'm injured, I can input it into the VAERS system. In Canada, the public cannot access that system. The public cannot input into the system. It has to be done by a doctor. And we know what the medical profession, where their head is at on this. So imagine knowing that information. Now look at those numbers again.
Well,
yeah, and I can speak to those. I can tell you I know that you can go in the federal budget. So in the federal budget of you add it up, this program has received $78 million from the federal government in the last 3 years. And you can see the number. They've paid out 16 million. So what is that? 16 over 78, like it's less than there's a solid $60 million that's just been spent on administration instead of going towards people who need it.
And there's two really big portions to this. Is that there was another system that was in play before this was in play. Those statistics have actually been deleted. So I'd started digging in. You could actually see the spreadsheets where doctors were actually able to provide this information. Yeah. VISP actually replaced the old system. So all the statistics, as far as I know, were completely erased off of the old statistics. The second thing is, and I'm going to give Epoch Times a lot of credit for this, and Mia and Noah Chartier discussed this at great lengths, is the Canvas data that was provided. And on a scientific analysis regarding anything, doing a survey is the absolute worst way for science to be conducted. But basically, they were doing a study on how many people were being injured by the vaccines. So Canvas is actually a conglomerate, a number of provinces, Nova Scotia, British Columbia, Alberta. There's a number of different medical boards that actually take part in this. So what Canvas would do is they would call people after 7 days of, themselves or a loved one taking the jabs, and they would actually report what they see, and Canvas would collect this data. And the statistics basically show that it was like 1 in 10 people were being injured by the vaccines. 1 in 20 were actually being injured to the point where they had to miss work or miss activities. And this is even in children. And the biggest part about this, and the number one thing that I'd said, even before the jabs rolled out, is that if you take a child that is between 6 months and 2 years old, they're not really good at communicating what their injury is. When a child cries, a parent has to try and decipher what that cry means. And I know that there's a number of doctors that have brought this exact same point up online, is that, we say that here's where the injuries are. And, they had this bell curve that was actually really tricky. And we'd met with Colonel Redmond in Edmonton, and I wanted to spend some time actually talking about this. And we just ran out of time with him that night. Is that the exclusionary policies that surrounded the vaccine injuries were, if you had a pre-existing condition that was worsened by the vaccines, it could not actually be deemed a vaccine injury. So if you already had minor heart disease or minor heart damage, but this actually progressed at a much more rapid pace, or if it was cancer or whatever it was, because the pre-existing condition was inside of your body, it could not be attributed to the jabs. And that's what actually explained the bell curve. So if you take the people that showed the lowest vaccine injuries, and this is by even percentage or by 100,000 per 100,000, infants can't communicate. And on the other side of the bell curve, the people that were the most vaccine injured, which are the elderly, which were the highest rate of mortality following a booster shot, they were declassified as vaccine injuries because they had a pre-existing condition of which they died from.
You're describing typical insurance companies tactics. I mean, I'm sure that, if I go and apply to this vaccine program and I say I got injured by the vaccine program, they're going to ask me a million questions. Did you take hepatitis pills last week? Oh, well, maybe that caused it. So, I mean, it's so easy to reject any claim, right? I mean, that's all that program is. It's an insurance program.
Except
That's actually how it was set up by the government as an insurance program.
it is, and except for, like I was saying, is you can't, Marty, even input your own injury. Your doctor
Yeah.
had to. So the doctor is saying it, and again, from Carrie's experience, her doctor said this is vaccine injury related, and they were coming back and saying no.
Yeah.
And they had to fight. It had to go back and forth from the medical doctor who touched her, saw her, looked at her blood work, was caring for her.
Yeah, and that program is not taking the word of her doctor. That
Yes.
program has their own doctors. You can see it on the website. So, and they have their own doctors who work for who?
Yeah.
For the federal government. So yeah, it's an uphill battle. I mean, now you're getting me frustrated.
And that's why, we could have gone after that program.
Yeah.
But what would that get us? Again, I think we have a very strong claim with what the government said to people and what the actual evidence was. What maybe not the first day, although the contract did say it. Like, this is another thing I find incredibly strange is the federal government signed that contract. So they knew by the time that became public, that was a few days, years, whatever later. But what did the province of Alberta do? We have a Minister of Health. We have the AHS. Did they ask what the contract said, what Pfizer agreed to, what they didn't agree to? Like, isn't there a duty and a responsibility on the public health agency in Alberta before it's Kenny runs around the province and Dina runs around the province saying, everybody get the shot, run to your clinic to get the shot. It's so important. You didn't even have the due diligence to check to see what you were telling your own citizens to do. And is that what we're going to accept in this country as responsible government?
Unfortunately, the answer to your question is yes. I mean, yeah, people accepted it. You bring up a point. You couldn't do your own due diligence because the documents weren't there. And I'll say this pragmatically, the documents couldn't be there because it hadn't been long enough. You know what I mean? Like if like when people said, I questioned it right from the bat. I mean, when somebody says it's safe and effective and I go, when did you develop it? In the last 6 months? Sorry. My next question is, what's the long-term effect? How could they possibly answer the long-term effect on something that has been developed last week? So yeah, the public, I've said this, right, and I'm not always popular on this one, but the public has a role to play. Like, this is what I've been advocating. Don't trust the government. Like, do your own research,
Well, and the one thing I'll just say too is nothing is safe and effective. Literally, not if you drink too much water, it's not safe or effective either. So when I saw the government's advertising this on billboards around the province, I just couldn't understand, like, safe and effective, but you need to have the fine print. There was no fine print.
Yeah, and their advertising was gross, right? I mean, the advertising that the government put out for this, like the syringes with the kids inside the syringe. I mean, that was like just it was really gross what the government did.
Yeah,
it's propaganda. Actually, some of it was downright. It looked like propaganda, which is what made me question it. If you have to advertise something that hard, if you have to pay me money to take something. Anyways, we're digressing. So I'm looking at the clock. Unfortunately, I think I've already gone too far. But go ahead. Sorry.
I want to go too, but it was just that point I was going to say is because when we were talking about the tobacco industry, you said and I was like, no, it was less harmful. And so that standard is totally different. Here we're talking about which one is less harmful. And here we were from safe and effective standard and advertisement. Right. So that's another point I hadn't considered until now. So I'm glad we had this little chat. So that's helpful too.
Are there videos that actually, I know in the US there are videos, right? I have a collection of them. Like, there are videos of like the Joe Bidens of the world, like very senior people saying the vaccine's safe and effective, like on the record saying it. Have you found anything like that in Alberta?
Yes, that's in our evidence. So we have Kenny saying it.
Yeah.
Justin Trudeau saying it, Dina Hinshaw saying it, and Theresa Tam saying it.
Oh,
In
okay. So you do. Okay, good.
In fact, Dina Hinshaw said that you should mix and match. It will improve your immunity.
Oh, wow.
That's what she tweeted. Her department under Dina Hinshaw, Public Health Alberta, tweeted those exact words, and it's.
I think that was the worst category, right, Sheldon? The guys who mixed were probably the most harmed, actually.
Well, and it's even bigger than that, because I mean, if you look at what Jordan Peterson went through, because he said bad words about people online, and he had to go through his re-education program. When you have somebody like Dina Hinshaw that says mix and match your jabs, people got injured and died. She's facing absolutely zero backlash from the College of Physicians based off of this, where Jordan put out mean tweets. I mean, the whole thing is completely fucking insane as far as I'm concerned, because we're looking at people that have hurt feelings versus people that have either died or have life-altering conditions that they may succumb to before they get resolve inside of a lawsuit. And there is no way to make these people whole. If you said, I'll give you $1 million for your leg, if I needed $1 million, you know, I'd have some consideration there. If you said, take this jab or you're going to lose your $60,000 a year job, and I took the jab and then I lost my fucking leg because of it, I don't even get that $1 million payout. I don't even get that as a fucking option, right? Like, this is how stupid things really got.
Yeah. Where is Hinshaw? What's she doing?
Fuck. If she's not hiding with her cats, then, you know, there's something gone wrong. Marty, I think know you were going to say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. Was it Jeff or was it somebody else who said, you know, the politicians and the senior officials like the Henshaws of the world, they have what's almost immunity, right? They're hard to go after. I mean, it's somebody, I think it was Jeff who said that you actually have a better chance going after the government than you do going after, say, the premier or a member of the government.
Yeah, 100%. So that's why we did, but it's very hard to get the government on something like this too. That's why it is a tough battle, and that's why they're so confident in their strike application, because normally you don't get them, especially for saying something, especially if they think they're doing their job and they're doing it the best, because we're trying our hardest.
Now, I don't want to put you on the spot for this one, but one of your colleagues out of Quebec, Glorianne, what's Glorianne's last name? Blais, I think. She's actually going after the prime ministers and the premiers and the health officials. She's taking a different. Do you follow her? Do you know what she's up to, or?
I saw a little. I don't recall exactly what her cause of action is, like the claim, but I do recall she's suing a number of elected representatives. I'll have to go back on my notes, but she's going after about 37 elected officials. So that's a big that's a bold move. Well, yes.
There is actually one other side of this thing too, is that individuals can file a complaint against their physician. So if somebody feels like they've been lied to, they can file a complaint against their physician. So for somebody like Hinshaw, who is a licensed physician inside of the province of Alberta, if we had the 4,000 or 5,000 people that have been seriously injured and issued a case, then she's actually got to go to defend these cases at the College of Physicians on her own dime. This is no longer on provincial funding. This doesn't come from Alberta Health Services. She's actually got to defend each and every one of these individual cases. So there is something to this. You can actually bury a doctor in the paperwork in the same way that they're burying
I suspect that while she was employed by the government of Alberta, she would have had some sort of protection or liability insurance. No, I mean,
no, I've actually gone through this.
Have you?
Okay. In BC. So the same thing was stated, and I was actually starting to build cases, and I've actually chatted with you about this briefly, Eva. And then I don't know, I've seen a ball of tinfoil or some magic beaming lights, and my focus. There's always so many things going on. We can't keep up with everything, but I tried to get this thing actually going for the number of, and it's actually, they have to be licensed inside of the province, and they have to be quoted to have given information that was that they couldn't have possibly been able to substantiate, and there was a lot of that information went out. So Henry, I think, was on a couple of points, but Hinshaw was exclusive to the mix and match. And you can, as a patient, because she's a licensed doctor, you can actually file a complaint with the College of Physicians inside of Alberta. She has to defend those cases. Each one of these things costs a minimum of about $1,000. So if you took the number of people that were injured inside of the province and they all filed a complaint against Dina Hinshaw, she wants to keep her license inside of the province. And even if she decides that she doesn't want to have her license, she still has to exit on a clean record. There can't be pending cases. You can't walk away from these things. She can actually still have these complaints go against her. You build enough of these cases, and basically what it does is it takes away everything that she's ever earned throughout COVID, throughout her career with Alberta Health Services. I'm not saying be vindictive, but when you're put into a position where you knowingly harmed people, when you've gone against the Hippocratic Oath, the biggest part of being a doctor inside of, what we understand as modern medicine, when you completely shirk your responsibilities to the point where you are shilling, when you're profiting off of other people's injuries or illness, to me, I think that everything and every effort should be done to make sure that they never practice medicine, make sure that they lose every bit of the livelihood that we see. How many Albertans, how many Canadians, they've lost their lives, they've lost their houses, they're living in the streets, they're going to food banks. This is all because of the restrictions that people like Dina Hinshaw put on them. Shouldn't she have to wear the same shoe? The Hammurabi Code: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. A thief loses a hand. Let's make things even. It won't make people whole, but it will be a deterrent for those that decide to go forward with the same horseshit.
I'm going to continue with my class
Right.
action.
Marty, you got a book, man. I said we'd keep you for like an hour and a half. If you want to hang in, I'm cool with that.
No,
But
I'm going to book. I got some people that are here, so it's Friday night, and
yes, I know. We can't keep talking about these things, but we have to keep holding our government to account. So
let's go. I'll stay another minute. So Eva, what's your next step? Is you're going back to court right away here on the 28th?
Tuesday, January 28th, we're in the Calgary Courthouse, 10 a.m. And it's also available to watch online. And that information is on the Rath and Company website. You could read the province's brief, the federal government's brief, and our response.
And you absolutely don't mind if a few supporters show up. It's not it's not bad luck, or the judges don't get upset by that or anything like that.
No, it's open court. And I think it's important for Canadians, Albertans to see, especially when the defendants are the governments themselves. This is the only opportunity. And actually, one last point I'll say is when the defendants, the province in Justice Feasby's case, they basically started saying, this is not the appropriate forum for this. This is for the ballot box, and this is for an inquiry. And Justice Feasby said, hold on. How are Albertans supposed to know who they're voting for when they don't know what happened, and this is the appropriate forum? They should find out what happened. So he put a stop to that, and I did appreciate that right off the bat, because how else? We don't have all this information in an open and transparent manner, and Canadians, Albertans should be demanding more of that.
Yeah,
it's a public institution. These are private, public officials, and all of this stuff should be available to the public, and we shouldn't be begging our government to give us information.
Right on.
So I'll be putting out a Substack. You're going to be sending me out a reminder. I'll put it out on Substack. I'll throw it out on Twitter as a reminder. We'll give everybody a couple of days' notice to stop down to the Court of King's Bench, have a sandwich as a
I
combo,
knew you were going to say that.
and show their support for the case. Carrie's going to be down there, so make sure you take some time to meet with Carrie, with Eva, with Jeff, and show your support and admonishment for like the disgusting behavior that we've all lived through. This isn't over yet, guys, right? So, man, we've got like 4,000 people watching us right now, which is actually like 4,100. So, big thing, of course, really important to the 4,132 people right now that have taken some time. Thank you, and we appreciate that. I hope you've gotten some information out of this. Again, if you want to find out more information about the cases that Eva's going through, specifically to Alberta, go to rathandcompany.com and look for the tab that says Class Action Lawsuits. So thanks everybody for showing up, and again, thanks Eva for the update, and Marty, always thanks for the conversation, brother. The next A&W thing, we'll do this like mid-February.
Yeah, and I can't see you on your party there on the 30th. I already told you I'm going to a hockey game with my daughter, so father-daughter's event that night, and it's the game starts at 7, and your event's at 7, right?
That's it, man. No.
Yeah.
You know what? When it comes down to it, fuck, all we do is politics. So take some time. Go spend it with your daughter, man. You know what? I'd go too if I wasn't like supposed to be at my own party.
We're knocking to do.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Cheers. Good night.
Have an
everyone.
amazing evening, everybody, and a great weekend.
Take care. Bye-bye.